want to tell you about seeds and about the people who plant them, specifically about a certain kind of gardener, the kind who plants trees they know they will never sit under, the kind who buries bulbs in November for a spring that may come without them. There's a name for what that gardener is practicing, and it's not optimism. Optimism would say, the tree will grow and I'll be there. What the gardener is doing is something older and harder than that. The gardener is practicing hope. It's an old practice, older than pride, older than any of the movements and communities we will talk about today. But pride, I think, is one of its most vivid expressions. Why do we hold pride now? Not in 2015, after a victory that felt like a rival, not in a season of confidence, but now, at a time when many people are worried, at a time when rights feel vulnerable. Why pride now? Because hope has never waited for the right moment. Hope doesn't work that way. Here's a distinction I keep coming back to. Optimism and hope are not the same thing. Optimism says, everything will work out. Hope says, some things are worth doing, whether they work out or not. Optimism depends on outcomes. Hope depends on values. And this is where we can see why hope is spiritual. Not because it's comforting or because it's easy, but because it asks of us exactly what faith asks. It asks us to act without proof, to move towards something we cannot see, to trust what we cannot guarantee. Hope is not a feeling, it's a discipline. It's showing up anyway in the dark and doing the thing that needs doing. The people who began Pride were not optimists. They had every reason to believe that change might never come, that the world they were marching toward might never arrive. They marched anyway, not because they knew they would win, because they knew that silence was unacceptable. That's not optimism, that is hope. And hope is one of the most spiritual things a human being can practice. Hope is what allows us to act from our values rather than our fears. Hope is what allows us to imagine possibilities larger than the present moment. Hope is what keeps our hearts open when experience, sometimes long experience, tells us to close them. And here's the thing, every person in this room has practiced it. You have started relationships without guarantees, raised children without guarantees, joined this congregation without guarantees, loved people without guarantees. Hope is one of the most ordinary things humans do, and one of the most sacred. Because every act of hope is an act of faith. Faith that your actions matter, faith that the future is worth tending, faith that something larger than this moment is asking something from you, and that you are going to answer. And pride, it turns out, has been teaching us how to answer all along. Pride teaches us at least 3 ways to practice it. The first practice is visibility. Every time someone tells the truth about who they are in a world that might not welcome that truth, they're making a hopeful claim. They are saying, I believe a more honest life is possible. Not guaranteed or safe, possible. That takes courage most of us underestimate. To be visible is also to be vulnerable. In some places, in some moments, it's dangerous. And yet people do it anyway. Because invisibility has its own cost. Because living at a distance from your own truth is exhausting in ways that are hard to name. And because your visibility might be someone else's permission slip. The teenager who hasn't told anyone yet. The person who didn't know a life like yours was possible. Your willingness to be seen is a gift you may never know you gave. That is the quiet miracle of pride. Every person in that march is not just marching for themselves. They are marching for the elder who never got to march at all, for the one watching from the sidewalk, not ready to march. Visibility is never only personal. It ripples. Here we know something about that ripple. For the entire month of June, we display our pride flags. At our old location on Sawkill, we could hang them all outdoors in front of the sanctuary, where everybody could see them. That mattered deeply to those of us in the queer community. It said, "We see you." It said to every person driving past, "Queer people are welcomed here, just as they are." The flags were not decoration, they were recognition. There's a difference between a space that tolerates you and a space that sees you. Those flags said, "We knew you were coming. You don't have to explain yourself here. You don't have to brace yourself. You are expected. You belong." For someone who has spent a lifetime reading environments for safety, and most queer people do this constantly, automatically, exhaustingly, a flag on a building is not a small thing. It's permission to exhale. At this location, we can't hang them outside. We're doing the best we can with the space we have. But it still has meaning, and the loss of those outdoor flags is worth naming honestly, not as failure, but as the specific, unglamorous grief that comes with transitions. We are planting in different soil now, yet we are still planting. Our sea of yellow Side with Love shirts moving down the street is also a statement. A congregation saying, "We see you. You are not alone. We are not neutral." The people who see us march carry something home with them, even if we never know what it is, even if we never know who they are. I think about this when I stand in this pulpit. I'm non-binary and transgender. And when I am up here, I want that to be visible. I wear a pride lanyard with my known pronouns in large print. I usually wear my trans stole. I introduce myself with my pronouns, not as a lecture, but as an invitation, as a way of saying to anyone who might need to hear it, a queer person is in this pulpit, and they are welcome here. And so are you. And it works. Queer visitors sometimes come up to me after the service, telling me they saw part of themselves mirrored, thanking me for being visible. And every single one of them has become a member here. Every one, every time. That's not a small thing. That is visibility becoming community, one conversation at a time. And it is the accomplishment that gives me the most personal pride. I also wear that lanyard where I live. Woodland Pond is a continuing care retirement community in New Paltz. The residents are, by and large, of a generation that did not grow up with the language or the visibility that younger people have access to now. Most of them try. But wearing my lanyard there is not always comfortable. Sometimes people look at it and step away. That discomfort is not my intention. Normalizing something that should not need normalizing is. Setting the stage for the transgender people who will one day arrive there, people I will likely never meet, is the point. I want them to arrive somewhere that has already been asked to make room. And I will keep wearing that lanyard until I am no longer uncomfortable. That is the gardener planting in November, not comfortable, doing it anyway. That is visibility as hope. A second practice is community. Hope is rarely an individual achievement. Most of us borrow it when our own supply runs out. Someone else carries us for a while. This is one of the deepest reasons faith communities exist. We store hope for one another, sometimes across generations. You may be sitting here today because someone you have never met held hope for you, held it long enough, planted it deep enough that it was still here when you arrived. Several years ago, this congregation faced a moment that could have broken us. Some of our queer members were deeply hurt by the actions of others. Old wounds surfaced. Old slights that had gone quiet suddenly weren't quiet anymore. It could have divided us. It very easily could have. We chose differently. We responded not by retreating, but by expanding. We started new supportive LGBTQ programs. We were already a welcoming congregation, and we decided that wasn't enough. Since then, we've added more LGBTQ services to our calendar. We activated our social action team. We started a queer social group. We offered transitioning and name-changing ceremonies for the wider community. We've held educational workshops on trans and queer and gender experience. We turned a wound into a welcome. And our presence at Pride transformed. What had been a quiet, low-key event became the largest social action event in our congregation. Our members showed up. Our shirts filled the street. And something unexpected happened. People found us. Queer folks, many of them transgender, came through our doors. Queer and questioning people who needed exactly what we had decided to become. Today, roughly 30% of this congregation identifies as a member of the queer community. Our Transgender Day of Remembrance service draws people from across the surrounding community. The people who made those choices several years ago could not have known that. They planted in November. They may not have seen the spring, but the spring came. I believe the people who made those choices are still present in what they built, in every name read aloud on Transgender Day of Remembrance, in every queer and questioning person who found their way to our doors, because someone planted deep enough, long enough ago, that the welcome was still here when they arrived. Faith communities across the religious spectrum are navigating a difficult moment. Shrinking attendance, stretched volunteers, financial pressure, families pulled in more directions than they can imagine. A world that has made gathering harder and sometimes less safe. We are not alone in this, but knowing that doesn't make it easier. We've been in uncertain moments before. We know what it looks like to face something hard and choose expansion over retreat. And we're being asked to do that again. Next year looks different from this year. Our pulpit will be filled with more voices than we are used to. We will cross a threshold into a new space. Some programs may change. Some may not survive the crossing. The volunteers who have carried so much are tired, and the structures they held are shifting. We don't know yet what we're walking toward. And that is not a crisis. That is exactly the condition hope was made for. What we were asked to do, what every faith community in uncertain times has been asked to do, is to hold hope for the people who come after them. Plant it deep enough that it is still there when they arrive. We have done it before. We know how. The third practice is joy. Why are Pride celebrations so joyful? Why the music, the dancing, the color, the laughter? Why insist on those things, especially now, especially when the stakes feel high and the future feels uncertain? Because joy is evidence that fear has not won. Joy is not the reward waiting at the end of the struggle. Joy is part of the struggle. Joy is a practice and a discipline. It requires choosing something against the grain of everything you're feeling, to celebrate what is worth celebrating, to dance even when you're tired, to wear the bright colors even when the world feels gray, to laugh with the people you love even when the news is hard. Joy says, "You do not get to take everything from me." It's an act of resistance, and it's also an act of invitation. Joy makes visible a world worth fighting for. You can't march towards something you cannot imagine. Joy is how we imagine it. Joy is the vision made physical, made loud, made colorful, made real enough to walk toward. The early marchers understood this. They were not marching because everything was fine. They were marching to say, this is what fine could look like. This is what we are moving toward. Come and see. This is what we are doing every year, every march, every song. I believe the future is already being shaped by what we plant today, by what we choose to do anyway. We don't know what our participation in Pride will look like next year. We don't know what this congregation will look like in 5 years. We don't know which programs will continue, which will change, which new things might emerge that none of us have even imagined. We don't know. And that is exactly the right place to be talking about hope, because hope is most needed when certainty disappears. Hope was never designed for the sure thing. Hope was designed for this, for exactly this. The future of Pride is uncertain. The future of our congregation is uncertain. The future of the wider LGBTQ community, still fighting, still marching, still making visible a world worth living in, is uncertain. The truth is, we just don't know these things because they haven't been written yet. And we will be the ones who write them with our dreams, our values, and with our actions. And so we are left, as people of hope always have been left, with a question. Not will it work out, but is it worth doing anyway? The gardener planting in November already knows the answer. I think you do too.